Very first thing, I'd like to say hey to all the new people, as we've had a fair few subscribers come in since the trailer. So if this is your first I.W.T.A.I episode you're watching, be sure to go back and have a look at the other ones, as there's a lot more content where this came from. Drop me a comment saying you're new, and let's get stuck into this episode of I.W.T.A.I. Now, like I said in the last episode, that this week is going to be slightly different, as I'm talking about a series or genre of films rather than just the one film. And that genre is... I know you guys probably don't like them, but it's something I wanted to talk about as we're scheduled to get a lot more films in this kind of genre. And I'm going to be going through 3 examples here to try and help me explain my point that I'm going to talk about later in the video. Ghost in the Shell was probably the first big live-action adaptation to go on and hit the big screen if you don't count stuff like, oh god. And you hear a lot of people complaining about the live-action adaptations compared to the actual either anime or manga, but I think these films get a bad rap and they're actually okay films for what they actually are. But I understand where a lot of the criticism are coming from, especially when you have such good source material to base essentially your whole story off of. I think it goes very much back to what I was saying about the live-action Iron Giant film that I would want to be made. If you've not seen the video, top right-hand corner there's an I button, you can press that, it'll take you straight to that video, then you can come back and watch this one. And it goes back to what I was saying about CGI being used to make visually appealing things, and I think that's what these anime films struggle with. And I get that you have world building to do, and that might come under that sort of thing, making the world look visually appealing, but I mean, you still need to counter that with an actual good story, and I think that's, again, where some of these anime films do struggle. In a sense, getting a balance between making things look visually appealing and telling a good story. The one problem I have with Ghost in the Shell is that everything feels way too gritty for being in the future. I mean, a good example I have to sort of counter this is the RoboCop reboot. And granted, it wasn't the best film, it was still set in the future and focused heavily on crime, but the world never felt gritty. And some people would say that's a problem. But in my mind, gritty isn't a blue hue over your entire film and have it raining all the time, like we've just taken some emotional Instagram picture. It's like these Hollywood directors think sci-fi means put a load of holographic billboards to the sides of buildings that look like they've been taken straight out of World War Z. I mean, where in the anime movie did you see this big Asian lady come out the top of a building? Someone want to point that out to me? And I'm not dissing the effects on this film. In fact, I think it's one of its strongest suits. I mean, Weta Workshop did amazing on their props, costumes, and even their robotics. I just think these guys need to know how much grit they're putting into these films. I just think they need to be careful with that. I think one of the main reasons I'm upset about this film is because I bought it thinking it was actually going to be a good film. Clearly that was a mistake on my part. Hey, at least I can watch it for behind the scenes. Alita Battle Angel is the most recent anime film to hit the big screens, and I do have a fair few problems with it. Which is strange because I haven't really read any of the manga that it was based on, or even seen the animated film that they released for it. But I think it suffers from a lot of the same problems that Ghost in the Shell does from a film aspect. The pacing was kind of off in the first quarter of the film, and the love interest just felt really forced. Which one really took me out of the film, as I wanted to get to know the character Alita more before we got into the whole why she was dumped in the rubbish pile and more of her backstory. Instead, we got thrown straight into the love interest and the bounty hunters, and some people would probably say, yay, more to the action, but I would have liked to know why she was doing these things, instead of just what Hollywood always does and have robots fight each other. The one thing I will say, though, is that the story aspect was so much better than Ghost in the Shell. They seemed like they actually got people who knew the source material and was actually passionate about it, because they referenced stuff from the actual anime, sometimes taking things scene by scene. And although I haven't watched the full film, I do know snippets of it, and I do know some of the characters, so I'm glad to see that they brought some of those guys back for the live-action adaptation, and tried to give more to the story, as opposed to just the visual effects. Which I think Ghost in the Shell had more of a problem with, as they showed off a lot more of their effects rather than telling a story. But similarly to Ghost in the Shell, I think Alita also suffers from the grittiness factor, where the film feels way too gritty than what it should be. But unlike Ghost in the Shell, that was actually a story factor, so I can't really get angry at how gritty the film actually was. Overall, Alita Battle Angel was a pretty good film, and I'm actually fairly excited to see a sequel of it, as most of these anime films do tend to leave it open-ended in case they can get a sequel out of it, which I agree with, because I feel like if they had tried to wrap up Alita into just an hour and 37-minute long film, then we would have had even more of a pacing problem, and I'm glad they're trying to split it into 2 or maybe even 3 films, just so we can get a decent story spanning that amount of time. Or do something like a Netflix series where you can really spend each episode really learning about the characters, and that way you can get a lot more story in there than just worrying about the visual effects. Speaking of Netflix... Now this changes things up a little, because I've read the manga and I've seen the anime, both of which I can say are amazing. But the film, oh my god, the film. Why Netflix? Why would you do this to us? Should we start listing things wrong with this film? I think we should. Nothing against the actors in this film or anything, I think it was probably more due to the script, but Light and Mia's character? Enough said. The story was so incredibly rushed and incredibly bad that you didn't get any time to actually get to know any of these characters, unlike how you do in the anime. And not only that, they changed these characters. Light in the anime, straight-A student, massively intellectual mind, smart enough to outwit the greatest detective in the world. Once he gets the Death Note, he will play with his girlfriend's emotions to get what he wants. All in all, one messed up son of a gun. Light in the Netflix adaptation.
Do you really think that I'm Kira?
No, I know it.
Well, if you're so sure, then why haven't you just arrested me?
I made a lot of mistakes, and then I tried to fix them, but it didn't work.
He's a dumbass. And that's just one character they changed. The one great thing about the anime, or manga, because they basically have the exact same story, you got these 2 characters, L and Light, are trying to play this cat and mouse game of chess. Each of them are trying to stay one step ahead of each other, and you learn the way that they do this by having these great moments in the anime where it goes blue and red and they start talking to the viewer so the viewer can understand what's going on and learn how they think. We never get anything like this in the Netflix adaptation, which is probably why the audience doesn't know what's going on half the time. I think you guys can kind of get what I'm trying to say here. The Death Note film is a bad film, and it would be the worst film ever if the effects didn't look so damn good. I mean, look at Ryuk in the anime. You would think this in live action would be nightmare fuel. And in live action, he is nightmare fuel. And they got William Dafoe to voice him. And my god, it sounds perfect.
Hey kid, it's pronounced Ryuk.
I really wish he had more of a part in the actual live action film, because the model looks incredible, and William Dafoe's voice sounds perfect alongside of it. If this Netflix film had been a series, I feel like we would have got such a better story, and we could have borrowed a lot more from the actual anime/book to get some of that story, and we could have had a live action adaptation of Death Note, and it would have been sick. But oh well, we got a load of trash. But my point is, the visual effects were really good for the Death Note film, but the story was terrible. Now let's look at 2006, where they released a live-action Death Note film in Japan. The story was amazing, basically following the same story as the anime, but the effects weren't brilliant, and that's where they lost a lot of their audience. But Japan have never been really that good at their effects. Overall, and I'm not trying to come across as racist or anything here, because Hollywood have come up with some very good stories in their time. However, I noticed that Japan know their source material a bit more and are very good at telling stories, but they just struggle with their effects. And it seems like these Hollywood studios counter that with an okay story but stunning effects. The solutions are fairly simple. If a big studio is going to focus on an anime title, they should focus on ones that have a very simple and very clear story, so the audience aren't overwhelmed and needing to know these little tiny bits of lore. Stuff like Attack on Titan or Awoni? Awonai?
Awoni.
I don't know, that game that PewDiePie played, I think it would be very easy to tell a story like that, as you'd just have to focus on telling a very scary story about this monster. And ironically, Japan have already made these into live-action films, and the stories for them are great, it's just the effects do lack, similar to the Death Note one. But these types of films would be awesome to see, written by the people who know their source material, and then developed by a Hollywood studio. Oh wait, Oh, I guess that's a whole nother episode of I.W.T.A.I. Thanks so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch my videos out of everybody's on the internet. Like I said in the beginning of this video, if you're new here, please go ahead and press that subscribe button if you've liked what you've seen. We're on 188 subscribers and we're almost at that 200 mark, guys. I cannot wait to get there. So if you feel like your friends would be interested in this series, go ahead and show them. I'd greatly appreciate the shares. Also, once again, guys, I really appreciate all the comments I'm getting. I really like going ahead and reading them, and I reply to as many as I feel need replying to throughout the week. Also, guys, thank you so much for the patience that you've had. I know last week was only the channel trailer, but I seriously spent so much time on that, as I wanted it to look like my style, and I drew every single frame of that animation. That's why it took so long to release. And you'll also notice that that's the new intro. I feel like that's much better, and that's exactly what I was planning on doing. Like I said in my channel update video, that stuff was all temporary, and I look forward to making the production value of this channel just through the roof. But anyway, guys, thanks for sticking around. Let's see if we can get this video to 30 likes. And just to see if you got this far, let's put this in the comments, just so I can see how many of you watched till the end. But anyway, guys, I'll see you next week for another episode of I.W.T.A.I.